Now, we know the boxes from Whitby were delivered to the house next door. If his resting place we can trace, we can make sure he roams no more.
We made our way to the house, keeping in the shadows of the trees. When we got to the porch, the professor fell to his knees. From her bag, she took out 3 things: garlic blooms, electric lamps, a revolver and a knife, a crucifix and sacred host.
For you each to protect your lives.
She straightened up and tried the door, till she found the right skeleton key. She stepped forward onto the floor.
In manus tuas domini.
We proceeded to the chapel, across many rooms thick with dust, till we came upon an oaken door, ribbed with bands of ferrous rust. As we opened it, we were met with a pungent, acrid smell, as of all the ills of mortality, the very stench of hell.
We must examine every hole and corner and cranny to see how many boxes there are left. And once we know, we must find a clue to what has become of the rest.
We found 29 boxes left of the 50, scattered along the chapel wall. Suddenly there was a strange phosphorescence, and for a moment we stood there appalled. The whole place had come alive with rats, swarming all over the floor, each minute multiplied by thousands. Lord Godalming rushed for the door. From his pocket he took a small silver whistle, from which he blew a shrill blast. Whereupon 3 terriers came around the corner. I never saw dogs move so fast. They set about the rats with such great efficiency, making sudden darts at their venomous foes. The shadow of dread seemed to slip from the place, and to a man, all our spirits rose.
So far, our night has been most successful. None of us have come to any harm. But I'd prefer not to tell Madam Mina. I do not wish to cause her alarm.
When I returned to our room, Mina was sleeping, breathing so lightly, scarce, I could hear. I shall keep dark over the night's doings. It's too much strain for a woman to bear. In the morning, I slept late. The sun was high in the sky, but still I woke before Mina. She looked paler than usual. I've no idea why, and her face seemed unnaturally leaner.
This morning I slept late, much later than Jonathan. He's not mentioned what happened last night. I'm sure it's because of his great love for me and his desire to spare me a fright. Last night I went to bed when the men had gone, although I didn't feel sleepy. I kept thinking over all that has happened, and this morning I feel anxious and weepy. I can't quite remember falling asleep last night. There was a silence so profound. When I rose and looked out of the window, there was a thin streak of white mist on the ground. It crept with almost imperceptible slowness, seemingly with a vitality of its own, across the grass and up to the window. I shivered, for I suddenly felt so alone. Renfield's room lay below mine, and I heard frantic, passionate pleading, no doubt to do with his unusual taste and his disgusting habits in feeding. I felt so frightened. I crept back into bed and tried to shut out Renfield's screams. I pulled the covers over my head, and then I must have dreamed. The air was heavy and dank and so cold, and the light seemed dim all around. The gaslight which I had left on for Jonathan had apparently been somehow turned down. The mist had grown thicker. As it poured in through my room, through the joinings of the door, it formed a whirling pillar of cloud and rose up from the bedroom floor. The light of the gas seemed to divide into 2 and shine through the fog like red eyes. Some leaden lethargy seemed to chain down my limbs so that I was unable to rise. Suddenly, the full horror dawned upon me. Jonathan and Lucy had experienced something like this. The last I remember was a livid white face bending over me out of the mist.
This evening I drove to Walworth to find Joseph Smollett taking tea. He remembered taking 12 boxes to Mile End and Birdmansea. He also heard a man named Bloxham had moved some boxes too.
Wait a minute, Governor. I'll get the address for you.
I eventually located Bloxham and paid him for the information. He said he'd moved 9 boxes. Piccadilly was the destination.
Both houses, they was empty, and you ain't never seen such dust. And them boxes were blooming heavy, and I'm not one to cuss.
So how did you enter the houses, if they were empty, as you say?
Well, this old bloke who engaged us helped me put them in a dray. He took it up his end of the boxes like they was pounds of tea. And there's me puffing and a-blowing, and I ain't no chicken, as you can see. And the odd thing was, when we got to Piccadilly, the old fella was there too. I don't know how he got there before us. I reckon he must have flew.
The house I found quite easily. Bloxham had given me good directions. The autumn night was drawing in as I carried out my inspection. The windows were encrusted with dust, the framework black with time. No one had lived here in years. All was decay and grime. I returned to Purfleet on the train and wrote my diary on the way. And, by the fire, read to the others of my discoveries of the day.
I am puzzled afresh about Renfield. His moods change so quickly, I cannot keep pace. This morning, he was sitting in his cell, a superior smile upon his face. What of your flies these days?
They are not without some striking features, but the soul is a butterfly, so the ancients say. Much more fascinating creatures.
Oh, so it's a soul you're after now?
No, I want no souls. Life is all to me. You must find another patient, doctor, to study zoophagy.
But what of the creatures you've consumed? You're responsible for their souls. Suddenly he jumped to his feet, his dark eyes blazing like coal.
The hell with you and your souls! Why do you plague me so? Haven't I enough to pain me already? And you would add to my woe?
I could see he was becoming excitable, and so I turned away, preparing to go, whereupon Renfield said with such sweetness,
I'm most grateful to you, Doctor. You know.
I placed a man in a corridor that night, close to Renfield's cell wall, and told him if anything strange or unusual happened, then he was to give me a call. A little while later, just after 2, the attendant burst in through my door. He'd heard Renfield call out as if in fright, and found him face down on the floor.
I've had a terrible dream, Dr. Seward. I've never felt quite so weak. My face feels dreadfully swollen, but I shall endeavour to speak. The Count appeared at my window and raised both his hands. I looked out over the grass, although I heard no spoken commands. Through the mist, I could see a dark mass.
Hundreds of thousands, millions of rats will be yours throughout eternity, each one a life pulsating with blood, if you will fall down and worship me.
A red cloud like the colour of Blood seemed to close over my eyes, and before I knew it, I'd invited him in. Looking back, that wasn't terribly wise. He stared at me. His red eyes were gleaming. His white face pierced the gloom. But his smell had changed. At first I thought I was dreaming. It seemed like Madam Mina had come into the room. She had visited me this afternoon, but she looked really unwell. She was like tea that had been watered down. He was draining her lifeblood, I could tell. It made me mad to think of that. So when he entered, I grabbed him tight. At first I thought I was going to win. I held on with all my might. But then his eyes burned into me, and my strength became like water. I tried to keep him from sweet Madamina, who I think of like a daughter. He raised me up and flung me down. I heard a noise like thunder. I saw a dark mist approach the door, and somehow it stole under.
Mein Gott! Now he knows the worst. There is not an instant to spare. He is here. We know his purpose. To Mina's room, he will be there.
We shoved and burst into the room, and a dreadful sight we beheld. Mina was kneeling on the bed, and both her hands were held by the left hand of the Count. With his right, he gripped her head and forced it into his bosom. Her white nightdress was smeared with red.
Now you may as well be quiet. This time is not your first. A little refreshment to reward my exertions. Your veins will appease my thirst. So, you, like all the others, will pit your feeble brains against mine. And you will help those people hunt me and frustrate me in my designs. But you know now, and they know in part already, what it is to cross my path. I, who commanded nations centuries ago, will release the full power of my wrath. And you, their best beloved one, are now flesh of my flesh, blood of my blood, kin of my kin, my beautiful, bountiful winepress. But you are yet to be punished, for you have aided in thwarting me. So when I call you, you will come, be it over land or over sea. Ah!
The Count turned his face and looked at us. Devilish passion gripped his features. The white, sharp teeth behind the bloody mouth. A man became like some wild creature. He threw Mina back upon the bed. Was it too late to save her? Dracula coiled himself to spring, but producing the sacred wafer, the professor held it up towards the Count, who stopped dead in his tracks. We all lifted our crucifixes and slowly forced him back. Suddenly, a great black cloud sailed across the sky, and the moon and the moonlight failed. By Quincy's match, we saw the mist. Underneath the bedroom door it trailed.
Oh my God, pity me. Shower me with thy praise. I who have walked in righteousness and meekness all my days. Unclean, touch me no more. I have become one you must fear. I'm tainted now with his foul blood. Oh, Jonathan, my dear.
Then she began to rub her lips, as though to cleanse them from pollution. It was pitiful to see her so lost in terror and confusion.
We met in the study at 6:30 to discuss what should be our next step. The first thing we agreed on was nothing from Mina must be kept.
There can be no more concealment. I cannot suffer more than I suffer now.
But even as she said it, I saw a frown wrinkle Van Helsing's brow.
Oh, but dear Madam Nina, are you not afraid? If not for yourself, then for others who by yourself might be betrayed.
With the devotion of a martyr's, the light shone in her eyes.
If I find in myself a sign that I'll harm the ones I love, then I shall surely die.
Surely you would not kill yourself.
I would, if there were no friend who would save me so desperate an effort and such a painful end.
A great sob rose in Van Helsing's throat, and she gasped for breath.
My child, there are some here amongst us who would stand between you and death. On your living soul, I charge you that you live for all your worth until this creature who preys upon you is driven from this earth. And to this end, we must search until we find each and every box. And then we stop the earth and run down our wily fox. The Count's lair at Carfax is where we will resume our chase until we have located the monster's hiding place. Then on to the house at Piccadilly, where Jack, you and I, my friend, will stay, whilst Quincy and Lord Godalming will destroy his lairs at Woolworth and Mile End. Now, dear Madam Nina, you are safe here till we come back. But first, let me see you armed against attack.
So saying, he touched a sacred wafer to Mina's pure white brow. She emitted such a dreadful scream, our hearts froze. Then I saw how. The wafer had burned her snow-white flesh and left its livid mark. Mina's corruption by Dracula's blood could not have been more stark.
Unclean! Unclean! I must bear this mark until the judgment day.
I held her tight in helpless grief. Our friends, weeping, turned away.
And so, as Christ bore his cross for God, then we must do the same. We are his chosen instruments. We go forward in his name.
We entered Carfax without trouble. Van Helsing performed administrations, then on to Piccadilly to carry out similar operations. Once inside the dining room, we found 8 boxes out of 9. Van Helsing began to open the first.
Come, we must waste no time.
On the table were deeds to Dracula's houses and a little bunch of keys. Taking notes of the addresses, Arthur and Quincy went off with these. The rest of us stayed in the house with what patience we could summon, waiting for the safe return or for Count Dracula's coming. About half an hour later, Quincy and Lord Arthur did indeed arrive. Our hearts were full of gladness to see them both alive. They came in quickly and closed the door, and as they moved along the hall, Arthur said they had found 6 boxes in each house and had destroyed them all. As we waited for the Count's arrival, Quincy placed us each in position. We heard a sound from down the hall. Slow steps approached with suspicion. Suddenly, he leapt panther-like into the room. Before we could raise a hand to stay him, then I slashed with my curkery knife, fully intending to slay him. The Count swayed back, and the trenchant blade by inches missed his throat. Instead, it slashed a 3-inch gash in the fabric of his coat, where hence banknotes and gold coins fell out like golden rain. A snarl passed over Dracula's face, which turned into a stare of cold disdain. Holding the crucifix and the wafer in my left hand, I felt a surge of power. The others spontaneously did the same, causing Dracula to cower. Hellish rage, hate and malignity passed across Count Dracula's face. The next instant, he swept under my arm with sinuous animal grace. Grabbing a handful of money from the floor across the room, he dashed and threw himself out the window, whereupon it duly smashed. He tumbled into the yard below. Amid the crash, the glitter of falling glass, we saw him spring up unhurt from the ground and across the courtyard fast. He pushed open the stable door, and there he turned and stopped.
Look at you, pale faces all in a row, like sheep in a butcher's shop. You think you left me no place to rest, but you're very much mistaken. My revenge is only just beginning. The girls you love, I've already taken. And soon you and others will yet be mine, my creatures, to meet my every want and need, to do my bidding, and be my jackal whenever I want to feed.
He then passed quickly through the stable door, throwing the rusty bolt with a creak. I turned and looked at the other four. We were all too stunned to speak.
Notwithstanding his brave words, I sense fear in his tone. Why does he hurry? Why take the money? He's like a king without a throne.
He picked up the deeds and the remaining money and burnt all the other things in the fireplace. Meanwhile, Maurice Harker and Lord Godalming left the house to give chase. He had, however, completely disappeared. None of the neighbours had seen him depart. It was late afternoon with sunset near, so we gave up the search with heavy hearts.
Let us go back to Madam Nina. We have done all that we can for today. There is but one earth box remaining. Soon we may have him at bay.
Mina had a request to make of Van Helsing. She wished to be hypnotised, so she passed her hand and repeatedly in front of Mina's face, till there was a faraway look in her eyes.
Where are you?
I do not know. Sleep has no place it can call its own.
Where are you now?
It's all strange to me, for I am far from home.
What do you see?
Nothing. It is all dark.
Can you hear anything at all?
The lapping of water gurgling by. I feel myself rise and fall.
What else do you hear?
The sound of men's feet as they run about, and the creaking of a chain. The clank as the capstan falls into the ratchet lock, over and over again.
Then you are on a ship.
Yes. Yes, I am.
What are you doing?
I'm still. So still, like death.
Her open eyes then closed tight again. Her voice faded into a deep breath. She lay down like a child sleeping. Then with a long sigh she awoke. Van Helsing repeated what she had said to her. And Mina excitedly spoke.
Then there is not a moment to lose. It may not yet be too late.
Quincy and Arthur rushed for the door, but Van Helsing shouted,
Wait! That ship was weighing anchor. There are many doing just the same. We would seek a needle in a haystack. We'd play a child's game. We now know what was on Dracula's mind when he seized the money and avoided Jonathan's knife. He has taken the last earth box aboard a ship. He flees like the wounded fox flees for his life.
But why need we seek him further if he has left the land?
Because he lives for centuries, but not so you. Do you understand? Time is now to be dreaded, now your blood with his is tainted.
I was just in time to catch her as my poor Mina fainted.
And so Van Helsing, Quincy, and Lord Godalming went to the port of London yesterday in search of Count Dracula's ship that had carried him away. By crossing palms of silver, some men were finally found who had carried a large box of earth on board his ship, and she was farther bound.
And so, like the old knights of the cross, we go forward into the sunrise. Like them, if we fall in good cause, which is to ensure this monster dies. Friend Jack, I will speak with you alone. In Madame Nina, I see a change. Her eyes are a little brighter, her teeth a little sharper, and she's prone to keeping silence, which is strange. Just as with Miss Lucy, who confided in her diary, but not so her lover or her best friend. Madame Nina is travelling along the very same road, and we know oh so well where that road ends. We now know that when she is in hypnotic trance, she can tell us what the Count can see and hear. And so it must be that he can compel her to tell him what we do through his powers over her. And that is what I fear. So, at all costs, this is something that we must prevent. By excluding her from our confidence, though it pains her so, we must keep her ignorant of our intent, so she cannot see what she does not know.
In the morning, Mina asked me to bring Van Helsing. I thought she wanted to be hypnotised. He was dressed and seemed to be expecting her call. But her request took us by surprise.
I must go with you on your journey. I'll be safer and so shall you. For when the Count wills me, I must go and obey what he'd have me do. So it is better that I travel with you, rather than use some cunning device to hoodwink you. Yes, even Jonathan.
Madame Nina, you are most wise.
Van Helsing gathered the others and told them Mina was coming too. She said it was for the safety of all.
Oh, but her soul is true.
Now you are all brave and earnest, determined to do me good. But you must remember, I am not like you. There's a poison in my blood. When you are convinced that I am so changed, it is better that I die than I may live. You must drive a stake into my heart. I beg you all your oath to give.
Yes, I understand.
He swore to uphold his duty, and Mina kissed his hand.
I swear the same, dear Madame Nina.
And I.
And you must too, my dearest.
With infinite sadness in her eyes.
And now a word of warning, a warning you must not forget. The time I change may come unexpectedly, but your oath must still be kept. In such case, you must lose no time, seize your opportunity. For I shall be not with you, but against you, in league with your enemy. One more request I would make. I want you to read the burial service.
But my dear one, you are not dead.
No, my darling husband. As your wife, I should not disagree, but I am deeper in death at this time than if the grave were laying on me.
I am the resurrection and the life. Whoever believes in me, though he die, yet shall he live.
How can I tell of that strange
And everyone
scene
who lives
as we
and
knelt
believes
around Mina in that room?
shall never die.
Its solemnity, sadness and horror,
Believe this?
and yet
She said to him.
still sweetness in the gloom.
We left Charing Cross on the morning of the 12th, after a night of much needed rest, arriving in Paris in the evening, where we boarded the Orient Express. Mina slept most of the time on the journey, but was alert before sunset and sunrise. So at those times of wakefulness, She agreed to be hypnotised.
I heard a swirl of water, but we are still. There is nothing I can see. I hear men calling, dragging ropes and chains. I feel a cool air blow on me.
Ah, you see, my friends, he is close to land. But he cannot disembark, for if he's not carried ashore, he must wait until the dark. For when it comes, as it did in Whitby, he can change his form or shape, and then he can jump or fly ashore and thus make his escape. So, if he does not make sure tonight or before dawn the next day, we may still arrive in time to find him still boxed up, unable to get away.
Now we are nearing Galatz. The engine's whistle is sounding. We are on fire with eagerness. Each of our hearts is pounding.
In Galatz, Morris took me to the hotel, whilst Lord Godalming sought out the Vice-Consul in town. Jonathan and the 2 doctors had gone to the shipping agent to see if Dracula had flown.
They were more than kind and courteous, and took us on board the ship anchored out in the bay. There we saw the captain, Donaldson by name. This is what he had to say.
In all my life, I've never had such a favourable run, all the way from London to the Black Sea. The wind in my sails from astern every day, like the devil was blowing behind me. The Romanians wanted to take his big box and throw it into the sea, but I told them straight, that box stays put or you'll be answering to me. We sailed up the Danube to Galatz, having made the record time. A man came aboard to claim the box, name of Hildesheim. I've got his address here somewheres. I don't mind passing it on to you.
We found Hildesheim in his office. He didn't have much to add. Said he was informed by letter to pass on the box, and quite frankly, he was glad to give it to Petrov Skinsky, who dealt with the Slovaks who worked down the river. He said he did not know what it was about that box, but it caused him more than one nervous shiver. We then sought for Skinsky. His neighbour said he had left 2 days before. No one knew where. Whilst we were talking, another neighbour ran up with some terrible news to share. The body of Skinsky had been found in the churchyard. His throat had been torn clean away. Was it the work of a wild animal? We knew, but could not say. We hurried away, lest we should have been drawn in and detained. With heavy hearts, we went to the hotel, where Mina had remained.
Whilst the men were resting, I've been going through events in my mind, and what I've said whilst in a trance to see what I might find. My surmise is that the Count decided to leave London as it was getting too dangerous to stay, so to go back to his castle by water was the safest and most secretive way. I informed the others of this news once he had woke and eaten.
Dear Madam Nina is our teacher. We are not yet beaten. Our enemy will be helpless if we come on him by day, for he dare not leave his box, lest he give himself away. He cannot cross running water, so on the boat he must stay. Those ferrying him may throw him overboard, and there he would be swept away.
I shall follow him by steam launch.
And I by horses, lest he land somewhere.
You must take care to protect yourselves. There is danger everywhere.
I've brought some Winchesters. I'm sure the Slovaks only carry knives. One shot from this here weapon, and they'll be running for their lives.
I think I'd better go with Quincy. And Arthur, you must not be on your own.
He looked at Jonathan as he spoke, who didn't want to leave me alone.
Jonathan, you are young and brave and can fight, but all your energies may be needed at the end. I will care for Madam Nina. Be not afraid for her, my friend. My legs are not so quick to run as once. I cannot ride all day. I cannot fight with lethal weapons, but I can fight in other ways. I will take Madam Nina to Dracula's castle. There is much work to be done, and other places I must sanctify before the setting of the sun.
Do you mean to say, Professor, you'd take Mina into that devil's lair?
He became almost speechless and could only stand and stare.
If you had been to that hellish den, Professor, you would know that each speck of dust whirling in the wind is a monster in embryo.
It is to save her from that place that she and I must go. If there was some other way, I would take it. Is that not so? Remember, we are in terrible straits. The Count is cunning and may escape us, and then he might choose to sleep for centuries and awake when we are dust. And our dear one may go to keep him company in defiance of God's laws. Not the beautiful Nina we now know, but as those others that we saw. So it is to save her from that place that she, if needs be, I give my life. For my dear friends, I would do that to give you back your wife.
Lord Godalming and Jonathan have procured themselves a launch. Jack and Quincy have half a dozen horses. The Professor and I take the train to Veracity tonight, and so our fates run separate courses. We shall drive ourselves by carriage to the Borgo Pass, for we have no one who we can trust. I'm carrying a revolver. I've never fired a gun before, but if we encounter wolves, then I must. Through this lovely country, full of beauty of all imaginable kinds, we travel via Veracity and on to Bistrit, leaving the Dambude far behind. All day long driving, the country gets wilder as we go. The great spurs of the Carpathian gather round. The Professor hypnotized me, and my answer was the same. Creaking wood and lapping water were the only sounds.
I am afraid for Madam Nina. She sleeps and sleeps all day, and she has even lost her appetite. It is cold, and the sky is grey and full of snow. I am lying by the fire as I write. I have tried to hypnotize her, but alas, with no effect. The power grows less and less each day. Just after sunrise, we reached the Borgo Pass.
This is the way. This is the way.
She was so deathly white and pale. For her, I felt afraid. So round her, I drew a ring upon the ground, and on it placed fragments of sacred wafer. Then suddenly, the horses made a dreadful sound. Snowflake and mist began to whirl and circle round, and formed into figures which drew near. I moved to stir the fire into life.
No, don't go without. You are safe here.
But you, it is for you I fear. Whereupon she laughed.
There is none safer in the world from them as I.
And then I saw Madam Nina's scar glow red on her pale face. And then, alas, I knew the reason why. The whirling mist and snow came close and began to materialize as I peered into the gloom. And then I realized that right before my eyes were the three women Jonathan had seen in that room. They smiled at Nina, and their laugh came through the silence of the night. I saw their bright, hard eyes, their white teeth and ruddy lips.
Come, sister, come to us. Come,
sister, come to us. Come, sister, come. Be like we undead. Come, sister, come to us.
I seized some of the firewood and wafer and advanced on them towards the fire. Laughing their low, horrid laugh, they disappeared into the night. The horses were lying still on the ground, and I realized that they had died of fright. And so we remained until the red of the dawn. I was desolate, full of terror and woe. But as the sun rose, so did our spirits. I have much to do and places to go. I left Madame Nina sleeping in the holy circle, and towards the castle I made my way. With my hammer, I smashed the door's hinges. They were open anyway, but I didn't want to be held prisoner. Jonathan's experiences helped me here. The atmosphere was strange and oppressive, and there was a roaring in my ears. I made my way towards the old chapel, for I knew this was where my work lay. And I found one of the women in her vampire sleep. By her beauty, I was moved to delay. My faculties seemed to be paralyzed and to freeze my very soul as I gazed on those voluptuous lips and the hair as black as coal. I felt her spell weaving its magic through me. I was transfixed by this creature so pretty. When, through the still air, came a long, low wail, so full of woe and heart-rending pity. It was the voice of my dear Madame Nina, echoing into this place. I went in search of the other tombs, tearing my eyes from that beautiful face. The two vampire sisters lay close by in their tombs upon a low shelf. And there was another tomb of nobler proportion, that of the vampire king himself. Pushing the lid back, I found it was empty. But within it I laid some of the wafer, thus banishing him from returning to that undead home forever. Then I turned to my butcher work. Through the bodies I drove my stake home, ignoring the shrieking and writhing form and the lips of bloody foam. Had I not been nerved by thoughts of the living, then I could not have gone on. But I was rewarded by the gladness that passed over each face, and I realized their souls had been won. With my bloody work finally finished, I could pity them now and weep, thankful their souls were now at rest, as they were embraced by death's sleep. Hardly had my knife severed the head of each when the whole body crumbled and disappeared. It was as if death, that should have come centuries before, arrived and announced, "I am here." I returned to Madame Nina. She was asleep. I awoke her with a touch. She cried out in pain when she saw my face, fearful I had endured too much.
It was late afternoon when we made our way east, in a state of perfect desolation. Carrying furs and provisions on this downhill path, there was no sign of habitation. After a mile, we sat down to rest. Then we looked back and shielded our eyes. 1,000 feet up on the summit of a sheer precipice, Dracula's castle reared into the sky. The professor climbed up on top of a rock and took her field glasses from about their case.
Madam Nina, I see a wagon and gypsies. Towards the sunset they race.
She swung round her glasses and scanned the horizon and suddenly exclaimed again.
Look, 2 horsemen coming up from the south and 2 from the north of this place.
The sun dropped lower and lower on the mountain tops, signalling the end of the day. Here and there I saw dots moving in 2s and 3s. The wolves were gathering for their prey. All at once 2 voices shouted out, "Halt!" and the gypsies obeyed their command. But their leader turned, and upon his word, knives and pistols appeared in their hands. Jonathan, Arthur, Jack and Morris dismounted and made a dash for the cart. The gypsies stood in a circle around it and waited for battle to start. Jonathan fought his way onto the cart and flung the great box to the ground. The gypsies cowered back as he tried to prise off the lid. The nails drew with a quick screeching sound. And there lay the Count, eyes blazing with hate. The gypsies in terror fled from the cart, and Jonathan's knife slashed into Dracula's throat and Morris's plunged into his heart. Like a miracle, before our very eyes, almost in the drawing of a breath, the whole body crumbled into dust, and Dracula was claimed by death. Then Quincy sank to the ground. His hand was clutching at his side. Blood was spurting through his fingers from a wound some inches wide. Jonathan held him as he took my hand. He smiled as I began to cry. Then he pointed at my face.
It was worth it for this to die.
God be thanked that all we've done has not been in vain.
From all the men came a deep amen, for I no longer bore the stain. And so the curse had passed away, as did Quincy, our dear friend. The sun sank below the mountain top, and the day drew to an end.
Her dearest Arthur was finally sent for, and he came to Lucy's bed. He had to touch himself. He had to touch her to convince himself that she was really dead. Lucy seemed even more beautiful as on her
How do
deathbed
you
she
normally do?
reclined.
Is that how you normally do it?
I don't know. I'm rotating though.
I like it off when you're off the ceiling. That's good. I like that one.
Did you
Where's
put
his
choose
eyes
virtual
and his
background?
A solid colour video background is required. Green
During
colour
the
is
past 2 or 3
preferred.
days, several cases have occurred. You'll have to start that again, sorry.